Hello and welcome to a reading of one of my favourite books for World Book Day. I love the Stinkbomb and Ketchup-Face series. In the first book, The Badness of Badgers, we meet our heroes, Stinkbomb and Ketchup-Face, as they go off on a journey around the kingdom of Great Kerfuffle, and they thwart the plans of evil and wicked badgers who love nothing more than driving fast cars, knocking over dustbins, and generally being a nuisance. This is the second book, The Quest for the Magic Porcupine, and I'm going to start reading the first 4 chapters. And if you like it, you can check out the rest. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1, in which our story begins and the villainous badgers escape from prison. It was a dark and stormy night on the island of Great Kerfuffle, and in the village of Loose Chippings, the streets were deserted. Nothing could be heard but the lashing of the rain and the crashing of the thunder and the thrashing of the wind, until the story started, and in the village jail something stirred. Now the village jail was full of badgers. They'd been there since the end of the last story, and they were bored because there was nothing to do but drive the little car too fast around the Monopoly board, knocking over all the other houses and hotels. They'd once tried playing the game properly, but it was no fun because the smallest of them, Stuart the badger, had eaten all the pretend money. Now, most of the badgers were staring gloomily through the prison bars at the pouring rain. A few were driving the little dog too fast around the board, just for variety's sake, but they weren't really enjoying it. And 2 were sitting in a corner with a little top hat, trying to imagine it was a dustbin and taking turns to knock it over. Stuart the badger was snuffling through the Monopoly box, looking for something else to eat, but he found nothing except a lot of pink and peach coloured cards. He nibbled thoughtfully on the corner of one, pretending it was a worm, but it just didn't have the same wriggly quality that made worms so tasty. He tried another corner in case it was any different, but it wasn't. Just as he was about to try a third corner, the card was snatched from his paw. "What's this?" Harry the badger asked gruffly.
"It's not a worm,"
Stuart the badger explained.
"or a dustbin."
"I can see that," said Harry the badger, turning it over and grinning a badgerish grin. "It's even better than worms and dustbins."
"Ooh,"
said all the other badgers, suddenly interested. They didn't know anything could be better than worms and dustbins.
"What is it? What is it?" "You'll see," said Harry the badger, strolling over to the door in a way that he hoped made him look cool. "Now all we need is a handy passerby." As it happened, somebody was just about to pass by the jail. His name was Blimey O'Reilly. He was out on this miserable night because he was going to visit his best friend Gordon Bennett, and he was struggling onwards under the lashing of the rain and the crashing of the thunder and the thrashing of the wind and the flashing of the lightning and the bashing of bats. The bats were bashing into him quite a lot, because their ears had got all filled up with rain and they couldn't hear where they were going. "Oi!" said Harry the badger. "Let us out!"
"Please," added Rolf the badger, a big badger with a big badge that said Big Badger. He didn't think being polite would make any difference, but he was anxious to make his first appearance in the story before the end of the chapter.
"Oh, no," said Blimey O'Reilly. "The king said yours had to stay in prison until the end of the next book."
"I know," said Harry the badger, "but that was before we found this."
He held up the card he'd stolen from Stuart the badger, and it said, "Get out of jail for free." Blimey O'Reilly read it carefully.
Does it still count if the corners have been nibbled?" he asked.
"Oh, yes," said Harry the badger persuasively, and all the other badgers nodded and tried to look sincere.
"Ah," said Blimey O'Reilly. "All right then."
And he opened the jail door.
"Ha!" said Harry the badger. "Free at last!" "Yay!"
cried all the other badgers, and they rushed out of the cold grey prison into the world, free badgers once more. Then they rushed back in again.
"Yuck!" they said. "It's raining." Harry the badger rolled his eyes. "What does a bit of rain matter?" he said, "compared to freedom?"
"But it's cold," the other badgers complained. Harry the badger sighed and turned to Blimey O'Reilly.
"Can we borrow your umbrella?" he asked.
"Please," added Rolf the badger, for much the same reason as before.
OK, said Blimey O'Reilly, handing it over. But it's not very big. You won't all fit underneath it.
Oh, yes, we will, said the badgers, as they scurried outside again and formed themselves into a tall, thin badger tower with Harry the Badger at the top holding the umbrella. Then Blimey O'Reilly struggled wetly onwards to a house round the corner where Gordon Bennett and his girlfriend, Maya Goodness, were waiting for him, and the tottering stack of badgers, claws glistening in the rain, wobbled to the woods to plan some evil and wicked doings to do evilly and wickedly. Chapter 2, in which Stinkbomb and KetchupFace wake up. The sun had risen high and the clouds had blown away. The birds were chirping in the treetops, lambs were frolicking in the fields, squirrels were happily throwing nuts at one another, and a class of excited little maggots was having a party in a dead rat at the bottom of the garden. The garden belonged to a lovely house on a hillside overlooking the little village of Loose Chippings, and inside the lovely house, in a beautiful pink bedroom, a little girl called Ketchup-Face was snoring like a steamroller. In the tree outside Ketchup-Face's bedroom, a blackbird was singing. Now, normally, this would have been enough to wake up Ketchup-Face, but on this particular morning it wasn't. So the blackbird flew away and came back with a trumpet. Perching on the branch nearest the window, it raised the trumpet to its beak and blew an exploratory burp. It peered into the wide bell. It carefully polished the mouthpiece with one black feathered wing. Then, like a world-famous soloist, it lifted the trumpet with a flourish and hurled it as hard as it could at Ketchup-Face's head. The trumpet bounced off Ketchup-Face's forehead with a clang. Ketchup-Face leapt crossly out of bed and rushed to the window. "Oi, blackbird!" she yelled. The blackbird blew a raspberry and flew away. Ketchup-Face shrugged, picked up the trumpet and crossed the landing to bother her brother. But as she entered his room, she saw something that filled her with horror. "Stinkbomb!" she cried. "Stinkbomb, wake up!" Stinkbomb rolled over, grunted, and said something like, "Wombats." "Oh, do wake up, Stinkbomb," Ketchup-Face pleaded, jumping onto his bed and hitting him repeatedly on the head with the trumpet. Stinkbomb opened one bleary eye. "What is it?" he grumbled. "We've overslept," Ketchup-Face wailed. "What?" Stinkbomb exclaimed, sitting up. "What time is it?" "Look!" Ketchup-Face yelled, pointing at the clock. "It's almost chapter 3. And just as she spoke, the clock began to strike. Chapter 3, in which the next bit of the story happens. The clock was still bonging chapter 3 as Stinkbomb and Ketchup-Face shoved themselves into their clothing. "Right," said Stinkbomb. "Now to get on with the story." "OK," Ketchup-Face agreed. "What are we supposed to be doing?" Just at that moment, there was a knock on the door. "Hooray!" said Ketchup-Face, rushing to answer it. "It must be the story. Hello," she added, flinging the door open. "It's King Toothbrush Weasel."
"I am not King Toothbrush Weasel,"
said King Toothbrush Weasel.
"I am the Royal Trumpeter."
He pointed at his badge, which said Royal Trumpeter, and then he went,
"Toot, toot, tooty, toot, 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 toot."
Stinkbomb looked at him with interest. "Shouldn't you have a trumpet?" he said. King Toothbrush Weasel gave him a hard stare.
"I do have a trumpet," he said. "It's probably the best trumpet in the world. It's too good to take outdoors, that's for sure."
"Well, you ought to have a second best one, then," Ketchup-Face said. "Here, have this." And she gave him the one the blackbird had thrown at her.
"Oh, thank you,"
said King Toothbrush Weasel. He put it to his ear and went,
"Toot, toot, toot, tooty, toot, 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 toot,"
again. And
announcing His Royal Majesty King Toothbrush Weasel, monarch of Great Kerfuffle, ruler of the little crinkly bits round the edge, and Commander-in-Chief of Malcolm the Cat. Toot, toot, tooty, toot, 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 toot.
Then he took off the badge that said Royal Trumpeter and put on a small crown and a badge that said King.
"Good morning, Stinkbomb and Ketchup-Face," he said gravely. "Bad news! The badgers have escaped from prison."
"Oh," said Stinkbomb disappointedly. "Is it going to be another story about badgers? I want it to be in a story about zombies this time."
"What are zombies?"
Ketchup-Face asked.
"Oh, they're sort of like crocodiles, but with 2 humps instead of 1,
King Toothbrush Weasel said.
That's camels, Stinkbomb told him.
Nonsense, said King Toothbrush Weasel. Camels are nothing like zombies. Zombies can't fly. And they don't hang upside down in dark caves.
But that's bats, Stinkbomb said.
Bats, said King Toothbrush Weasel firmly, are what you hit golf balls with when you're playing tennis. But that's not important. What is important is that we've got to catch the badgers and put them back in prison before they do any evil and wicked doings.
How?
KetchupFace asked. King Toothbrush Weasel's face fell.
I thought you'd know, he said. Bother.
He took off his crown and scratched his head. Then he scratched Stinkbomb and KetchupFace's head. Then he tugged thoughtfully at his long golden beard until it came off in his hand.
Wait a minute,
he yelped suddenly.
I've got it!
No, you've dropped it, KetchupFace said, picking up the beard and helping him put it back on.
No, not the beard, said King Toothbrush Weasel. I mean, I've got an idea. We are in a story, aren't we?
Yes, said Stinkbomb, most of the way through chapter 3.
Right, said King Toothbrush Weasel. So, to find the badgers, we need someone who knows about stories.
Of course, said Stinkbomb and KetchupFace together.
Yes,
said King Toothbrush Weasel dramatically.
So we need to go to the post office.
Oh, said Stinkbomb.
I thought you were going to say to the library.
Chapter 4, in which our heroes don't go to the post office. Just then it began to rain. It was not an ordinary rain. It was a horrible, inky, splattery, thick, wet rain that left dark splodges on the ground and smelt faintly of bananas.
What's happening?
Said King Toothbrush Weasel.
I bet it's got something to do with them badgers,
said KetchupFace.
Why?
Added Stinkbomb, putting up an umbrella he'd just found in his pocket.
Because,
explained KetchupFace patiently,
they're the bad guys.
That settles it, said King Toothbrush Weasel. To the royal carriage, quickly!
Outside the gate, waiting patiently, was a little shopping trolley with a sticker saying Royal Carriage stuck to its handle, and a small grey cat wearing a red soldier's jacket and a bored expression.
Starlight,
said KetchupFace delightedly, for this was none other than the little shopping trolley, who wasn't actually called Starlight at all, who'd helped them in their last adventure. And
Malcolm the cat,
she added, for the cat was none other than Malcolm the cat, who was a small cat called Malcolm the cat, but who was also the entire army of Great Kerfuffle.
Ah, hello, said the little shopping trolley shyly as they got in. Where to, your majesty?
To the post office,
commanded King Toothbrush Weasel. That's an awesome picture by David Tassyman, who also does the pictures in Mr. Gum.
Ah, certainly, said the little shopping trolley. Why are we going to the post office?
Because,
said King Toothbrush Weasel impatiently,
we need someone who knows about stories, and that means a butcher. And where would we find a butcher but in the post office?
Ah, said the little shopping trolley wisely, setting off at a squeaky-wheeled gallop. And before the sentence had finished, they were pulling up outside the Loose Chippings Library.
Here we are,
said King Toothbrush Weasel.
The post office.
Filled from end to end with all manner of books and run by the... this is King Toothbrush Weasel saying this.
The post office, filled from end to end with all manner of books and run by the person who knows more about stories than anyone else. The butcher!
But it's the... Ow!
said KetchupFace as Stinkbomb jabbed her sharply in the ribs.
What did you do that for? I was only going to say that it's the... Ow! Stop it! Why don't you want me to say that it's the... Ow!
Shh! explained Stinkbomb.
It's not
the ow,
said King Toothbrush Weasel sternly.
It's the post office, and this is where we'll find out how to stop the badgers doing their evil and wicked doings.
But it's the... Ow!
yelped KetchupFace crossly.
It doesn't matter what we call it, Stinkbomb hissed, rubbing his elbow. Let's just go in and find the librarian.
All right, muttered KetchupFace,
but it is the... Ow!
The Loose Chippings Library was the grandest building in Great Kerfuffle. Much grander than the Royal Palace, which was really just a small cottage with a couple of thatched turrets stuck on and a cat in a soldier's jacket standing guard outside. This was because the only sensible king that Great Kerfuffle ever had, who was called King Sensible, had realised that libraries were much more important than palaces. So King Sensible had ordered every spare penny in the kingdom to be spent on building a wonderful library. 100 years later, the only sensible queen that Great Kerfuffle ever had, who was called Queen Fairly Daft, because her parents considered Queen Sensible a silly name, had ordered it to be filled with books. This came as a great relief to the librarians who'd been sitting around for 100 years waiting for something to do. Now, Stinkbomb and Ketchup-Face and King Toothbrush Weasel and Malcolm the Cat were gazing up at this majestic building, hearts filled with awe, as the sinister banana-scented rain splotted and splattered around them. Dun, dun, dun. And that's the end of chapter 4. If you want to read the rest of this amazing book, where you find out what the badgers are up to, then you need to get it, because it's good. And it's written again by John Docherty. It's called Stinkbomb and Ketchup-Face and the Quest for the Magic Porcupine. And you'll meet some of my favourite characters. I like Stuart the Badger, because he's always getting things wrong.
And Rolf the Badger, who's, for some reason I've given him an Australian accent, I wonder why. And Harry the Badger, he's in it loads more.
And my favourite character is Malcolm the Cat, because he's always contradicting himself, and it's just quite funny. He's like,
I'll read, you can come into the castle. No, wait, you can't. No, I've changed my mind, you can come in. No, I've changed my mind again, you can't come into the castle. But you can.
Anyway, it's infuriating to read, but it makes me laugh every time. So if you want to find out who they meet at the Loose Chippings Library, spoiler alert, it's a ninja librarian, always good, then check this book out. Have a lovely World Book Day, and I will see you guys later.